The seminar stage of the Indiana Farm Equipment and Technology Expo. I'm Andy Eubank from Hoosier Ag Today, joined momentarily by Hoosier Ag Today Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin with a first look at 2022 weather. We thank our seminar sponsors, Ag Direct, Farm Credit Mid-America, and Bain Welker Equipment. And we welcome you who are here at the expo. Also welcome you who are watching the stream on YouTube or Facebook Live. Ryan, come on over. Ryan Martin, Chief Meteorologist. I did mention on the PA a moment ago that you refer to yourself as Weather Stud. Care to explain that?
Had to come up with a password or log in on the spur of a dime 20 years ago now, and that came to mind and it stuck.
Okay. Well, and he is a weather stud when it comes to nailing predictions, correct? You think you're the best in the business. So he's going to tell us what 2022 is going to bring. If you have a planting date by which you'd like to plant, he'll tell you exactly whether or not that's doable, correct? And it'll be a no. We already know that, huh? Well, with the first look at 2022 weather, Ryan Martin, Chief Meteorologist. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Andy. All right, so we will get to it. I'm going to not be on the stage because I'm going to talk not to that monitor, but I'll talk to this monitor quite a bit. So the very first thing we always have to do when we talk about outlook for months to come, which again, some folks think that you have a better chance at smelling a cow fart in the wind than you do at getting this right. But the first thing we have to look at is what happened in the past. And so we're going to go ahead and start taking a look at what the past 30, 60, and 90 days have been so far. If you've lived this will not be a surprise. But we're going to have to talk about where we have been before where we go. This is 30-day observed precipitation. Notice the scales over here. So this is from today. I actually updated this morning, so it goes back to November 15th. So for the past 30 days, we've picked up generally where we've seen rain about 1.5 to 2 inches or so, some odd inches up north, and there have been a band of heavier thunderstorms. This just really got bumped up over late last week. All the storms that caused the tornadoes down in Kentucky, they put some severe weather and some strong thunderstorms up here too. This is just flat out what we've picked up the past 30 days in inches. If we take a look at what the 30-day differential from normal is, all of a sudden then we're seeing color changes. Go ahead and bump that. So that we now see that most of the state is running at to a little bit below normal. All of a sudden, just that line of thunderstorms that developed last week and a little bit of early month moisture up to the north, those are the only places that we are above normal for the past 30 days here across the Hoosier state. This is a stark contrast to what we had in October. October, the wettest October that we've had since 1986. We almost eclipsed 1986, and if you eclipsed 1986, we would have been going back to about I believe it was 1901 and 1911, somewhere in there. So we put a lot of moisture down in October. Unfortunately, when you break up 30, 60, and 90-day coverage periods, and we're starting with December 15th, we're going to have to go back a little ways to kind of find out what's going on. So we look at the 60-day numbers overall, getting to, go ahead and bump it, the 60-day numbers for observed precipitation. All of a sudden, we're seeing then pretty much most of the state falling into the same zone, about 4 to 6 inches of rain, except for north central, where we had some late precipitation in October that bumped our totals closer to 8 inches for that 60-day window. All of a sudden here, now you're seeing why we had such a long, drawn-out harvest. Putting this in relation to normal, the next slide, we all of a sudden see that we're seeing more of the state starting to sneak into the above normal range, mostly US 24 northward, but really the central and southern part of the state weren't too bad even back over the past 60 days. So this would go back to October 16th. Let's go to 90 days. This is where we're really starting to see what happened in terms of delaying our harvest. We had most of the state anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain going all the way back to September 15th. Most of September was dry. Remember, we had a great start to harvest. Last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of September, we were able to roll at it pretty good. So most of this change from where we were in the 60-day period and in the 90-day period, matter of fact, go back to that 60-day observed. So that's back to one more. So most of the change that we went from going from 6 to 8 inches here into that 8 to 10 inch range, happened in early October, October 1 to 15. That's when we really started to get wet. All right, go ahead and bump forward to the 90-day differential to normal. So 90-day observed precipitation here, go one more, and we look at that with regard to normal. All of a sudden then, we're getting most of the state. Only the southwest tip is still staying at normal to a little bit below, but most of the state over the past 90 days 150% to 200% above normal. That's the blues. You get into this darker green here. That's 125% of normal. This is why harvest was drawn out for so long. I don't need to tell you that, but I do because I started looking at my 2022 forecast with this kind of thought process in mind. Anytime you're talking about a record or near record or top 3, top 5 kind of event in weather, whether it's precipitation or whether it is temperature derived. Anytime you're talking about something that doesn't happen very much, we need to look and try and find what the cycle did the last time it happened or the 2 times, or whether we can pick up on any kind of model cues as to what's really going on. And so that's what I looked at to start here and really kind of run. The hypothesis is, look, October was crap, so something's going to be happening down the road. Now that hypothesis may not be right, and it may. So we're going to kind of explore here. Let's move forward because the next thing that we're going to have to look at is what you're going to hear in the marketplace as you go forward. I'm a farmer too. All right, so I'm a meteorologist. You would think I would know what needs to happen so I can get my own crops out. I just finished harvest a week ago this past Sunday. So congratulations to me. But what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at what you're going to hear about in the months to come. If you pay attention to any other kind of meteorological source, you're going to get headlines that they're getting thrown out. It's like, oh, we have this massive cold dome that's going to be breaking down over the east and northeast and the Great Lakes and the Corn Belt. I've heard that now for the past 6 weeks, and today it's 60 degrees. Somebody pointed out at Hoosier Ag Today that I said on the air a couple of weeks ago that we've seen our last 60-degree day. Shame on me, today is here. But you get the idea. The cold air that is going to be talked about has not materialized yet, and I'm not saying that it necessarily will. This is a European model. We have so many different models that we can look at, but the European model is saying for December, our warmth is going to continue. So we're just going to ride the coattails of what's happening right now, right on through the end of the month. I happen to agree with that thought process. I think that even though we have a cool front coming through tomorrow that'll drop temperatures a good 20, 25 degrees, all of a sudden that just puts you back near to slightly above normal. So we're going to be warm through the rest of December, but we're going to stair step now through the next several graphics as to what a couple of different models are saying all the way through spring, summer, and even into early fall of next year. We're going to stick with the European here. The European is going to tell you, and folks are going to be tweeting about this. They're going to roll out all of this information. They're going to say, look, we're going to be above normal in January, and we're going to be a little bit wetter here over the eastern Corn Belt, not so much in the plains. As we go to February, the next slide, we're going to move and still stay wet, and we're still going to stay above normal. European says in March, we dry down. Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? How many want to just pick the European model and just run with it right now, the forecast? Amen, right? No, it doesn't work that way. We got dry and warm for March, according to the European. Going into April, key month. Oh, southern Indiana may be a little bit wetter, but northern Indiana should be near normal. And we're going to be seeing temperatures back off to near normal. What about May? We moistened the forecast up just a little bit across the I-states, all the way from eastern Nebraska into Ohio, but we're still looking at temperatures fairly close to normal. Going to June, all of a sudden we start to dry down over the Corn Belt. We stay near normal in Indiana, but here's the thing. We're staying warm as well. And I think, do we have July or do we not? No, we go to the next model. So the European stops at June right now. Here's another one that's going to be talked about as we go forward. Another model, still saying the same thing in December, warm, but a little bit drier here as we move through the balance of this month. I think in order to hit this forecast with near normal precipitation, we're going to have to see this event that comes through right now be basically the last one of the month. I don't think that's quite able to happen, but we'll see. The precipitation here nearby is definitely going to be splitting. Michigan's going to be getting more out of the front tomorrow, and central, or rather southern Indiana into Kentucky could get a little bit more. Let's go to January then. Wet in January. Any snow lovers out there? One. Congratulations, buddy. You might get a little bit of snow, or it could be all rain, and it would be sucked to be you. But you get the idea. We're getting moisture on this model, and we're going to be staying above normal. Next month, February, we get very warm and we get much wetter in this model. So all of a sudden we're seeing some differences here between these models. These are things that you're going to be seeing too as you hear folks talk about different models. Oh, such and such says this. Remember, we just are looking at two models here and they're going opposite directions so far through the month of February. In March, we are still wet. We're still warm, seeing a huge dry swath develop down over the deep south and the Gulf Coast areas. In April, we move into a drier vein for southern parts of the state. We at least move out of the excessive precipitation and the wet, but up north we stay wet and we're still warm. In May, we cool off. There is a big dome of cold air sliding southward out of Canada in May, according to this model, and we start to see that dryness build back into the central and southern plains. Moving through June, huge dry swath over the eastern Corn Belt, and we do that with temperatures that are near to slightly above normal. In July, we're looking at dryness consistently holding over the eastern Corn Belt, starting to wane a little bit in the central plains, but we're still looking at plenty of warm air in over the entire growing region of the United States. So then for August, we're going to push this one a little bit farther. Why do you think that this is so wet down here over the Gulf? What are we talking about usually in August down over the Gulf of Mexico? Hurricanes. This model suggests that we're going to be seeing a very active hurricane season through the month of August. Do I think that? I don't know. It's too early to tell. Talk to me in March or April. We'll start talking about what hurricane season may look like. But still, there's plenty of heat over the eastern Corn Belt and through our growing area. September, we'll finish it out with that here. September, we start to see dryness build, not just through the plains, but down over the deep south, near normal precipitation here, and temperatures pulling back to near normal. Why is that important? All of that is important is because we just ran through two different models that are saying partially the same things, but diverging their course as to how warm or wet, no, not warm, but how wet a certain period will be. And you throw in the United States model that's going to get talked about a lot, and then you're going to throw in a lot of other meteorologists that are going to be talking about some buzzwords like La Nina. That's being thrown into the forecast quite a bit here recently. And I think then you really have to start to view through a lens of what model is being talked about when we talk about our forecast. I want to move forward now then into my model, what I do, and if you've been into any of these talks in the years past, for 20, 25 years now, I've been working with models that aren't necessarily so pretty. It's a lot nicer to look at a map that has the state of Indiana that has colors on it than you have with this right here. But what we're looking at is saying, okay, can we find some patterns in a cycle of weather that goes back 115 years and say that, hey, when we have a super wet fall, when we have a super wet October, more likely than not, we're going to be seeing this next outcome move. That's what this model is. When we kind of dive in here, we look at both temperature and precipitation, and we're going to talk about precipitation first. And we're going to try and make heads or tails as to any of those models that we just ripped through so very quickly, whether we can base a forecast and base some good knowledge on those, or are those just guidance or ideas right now? So as we move through this, the thing to know in my model and the way that we've graphed this, everything in my precipitation forecast is with regard to normal. Okay? Who here knows what normal precipitation is in the month of May? Got any guesses? Give me a number. How much? 4 inches. What you got? 7. We got 4 to 7. Nice bracket. It's somewhere in between. Anybody over here? Go ahead. 5. You're right on. 30-year normal for Indiana, central Indiana, 5.05 inches of rain. Now, hey, it used to be 4 3/4. But we've actually seen some changes here where we've actually seen a lot wetter Junes and Mays in the past 30 years than we had the prior 30 to 40 before that. So that actually has gone up. But 5 inches in the month of May is what we would be talking about. Basically, our range runs from 3.5, 3 3/4 inches of liquid precipitation all the way back in January, and we bracket it back here in September at about 3 3/4 to 4 inches. All right, so it's going to be a nice little bell curve through there, with May being the wettest month. But we base everything in our modeling on above and below normal. Why is that important? That's because if you were listening when Eric Pfeiffer said earlier that I'm going to give you the forecast for July 4th, or I'm going to give you the forecast for May 14th, I think, or March 14th, Andy said, I don't care how much it rains on March 14th. I don't care how much it rains on May 10th. What I care about is what the forecast window for our crop season and what we're going to be looking at for that. We actually are starting to want to see plantable weather conditions, what, March 30th? You guys are in the field. Somebody planted beans March 30th a couple of years ago. I don't know how that went for them, but we're bumping that earlier and earlier and earlier. The average last frost here in Indiana still sits at April 20th. So we're going to start looking heavily at April moving forward for planting conditions. But before we get there, let's talk about the winter. Somebody wants snow. We'll see what we can do for you. On this model, doesn't look very good. We're looking at below normal precipitation. What we've got here is 6 points. And so these 6 points are spread out anywhere from being slightly above normal to all the way down 65, 70% below normal. So you're saying, Ryan, what the heck are you going to tell me that we're going to be below normal? Where are these points coming closest together? Where do we have the biggest concentration? We have the biggest concentration right down in this area between 40 and 50% below normal. So I'm thinking overall, my hypothesis then is that as we weight these and see these potential outcomes, every single one of these lines is a model run, tweaking our information ever so slightly as to what we expect. So all these different iterations are telling us that for the most part, we're seeing points kind of conglomerate down here, 40, 50% below normal on our January precipitation. All right, so if you love snow, is this a bad thing for you? No, because this is liquid precipitation. So if we get butt-numbingly cold in January, all of a sudden our snow is drier. So for the same, let's just say 2.5 inches of water that would fall, whether it's snow or rain, if it's really, really cold, that snow is fluffier, drier, and that same 2.5 inches gives a lot more snow depth. So you're not out of luck if you want snow, but it looks like we're going to be drier in the month of January overall than what we would normally expect. So let's move on then to February. Here we actually see our points move down. Yeah, we're going to stay on this one for a while, Matt. Just roll on here. So in February, we actually see an even greater concentration of points down in this 50% below normal range. But what we do here when we run this line right on through, we threw out this point up here, because that's clearly an anomaly. You have 4 out of 6 points that are here. You have a 5th one that could be near normal, but this guy is way out of touch. So that's why this is slightly higher, is because we're still seeing a point above here, but we're actually kind of zeroing in on this range. So we're going to be about 40% below normal in the month of February. That's what I feel with regard to precipitation as well. That's good, right? So far, we're not sopping this soil up too much. We're not going to get things too wet before we try and come into March. Well, hold on. Here in March, we're actually seeing precipitation values bump back up closer to normal. Actually, we could end up being about 5 to 10% above normal for the month of March here, but all is good. All is good if that moisture comes from March 1 to 20, as long as we dry out the last part of the month. And I do think that that is possible, because once again, we're seeing a majority of the models call for a sharp decrease in moisture that we see in March to April. So I'm thinking April could start to dry down quite nicely for us, and we might be able to get a somewhat early start to planting. Before you get too excited, we have to talk about temperatures a little bit, because it may not be fit on the temperature side, but at least we're not going to be super wet through the month of April the way things are looking right now. Then all of a sudden we get into May, and these points really are spread so far. This is a guess. This is a stab. And I'll tell you what I think when we get close to the end and talk about the ways things could go wrong or be interpreted. But right now, I think we could run into a few delays in May just because of some rain events that are going to be bumping in here, maybe some stronger storms, if you will. Too much rain coming at once rather than nice, gentle rains. But if we can get through May, if we get planted early or can get across ground in May, we then all of a sudden are pulling moisture levels down through the heart of the growing season. June, July, and August, all mostly below normal. June and July in particular. But the key that I always like to talk about here is we're looking at moisture totals probably around 20-25% below normal. We can still grow trendline crops with 75% of normal precipitation. If we're down 25% off of normal, it's okay. We can grow trendline crops. It's when we get down in that 40, 50, 60%, like what we saw this last August. Why did the soybean yield suffer in a lot of areas? We had rain totals of an inch to an inch and a quarter. Anybody that got 2 inches or more came out okay in August, for the most part. I don't want to be too broad in general, but anybody that was under that inch and a half, inch and a quarter area definitely had trouble. Why? All of a sudden you're pushing that down into that 60, or rather 60, 50% of normal or less precipitation in August. So I maintain that this isn't bad. It's not ideal. We could use more, but this is not bad. And then once we get into September here, we finally roll out this precipitation forecast with slightly above normal potential for precipitation. What does that mean? Hey, go for those double crop beans after wheat this year. You might actually pick up a nice little rain or two and make those double crop beans go. Ryan Martin is not responsible for any planting decisions you may or may not make on your farm. But we should pick up a little bit of moisture in September. Good for double crop beans, maybe not so good for trying to dry down corn, but I think corn, if we end up planting as late as I think we will in some areas, will also benefit from some September rains. So a lot of variability in this 2022 precipitation forecast, and keep the variability in mind. I want to draw this is the official forecast that I'm putting out in terms of month by month, the black dashed line, but I want you to remember these peaks and valleys here, because those are going to roll into our thoughts. And when we close out this presentation here in just a little bit before we talk questions, the variability tells me something very, very big for 2022. Now, Matt, let's go ahead and roll on to temperatures. The temperature map looks similar, or graph looks similar, but yet a little bit different. As we take a look at our 2022 temperature projections, it's most exciting back in here in the January and February months. There is hardly any kind of pattern that we can find at all back in January and February. We could be warm, or we could be cold. Now, what do all the outside models say? The European and the other one that I showed you, the GFS as well, all of those are pointing toward warmer seasonal temperatures as we move through January, February, and March. I'm not willing to concede that yet. I think one of those months is going to be cold. And we all should hope one of those months gets very, very cold. Because if we run with temperatures in this area, now my wife would love it. My wife will love running around outside and being able to do yard work and maybe even get an early start on the garden with warmer than normal temperatures in January and February. But you also know who loves it? The bugs, the grubs, and all of that. So we need a cold snap. My money is on February, honestly. I don't think we turn this tide of warm air that we're seeing right now in December. Honestly, we saw it back for a large part of November as well. I don't think we stem that tide in a January. I think it's a late January through February cold snap that we see, that we'll see probably 3 to 4 weeks of temperatures 5, 10, 15 degrees below normal. It'll be cold, and that's all we're going to have. We should start to warm up quite nicely already in March, and I think we're going to be pushing our soil temperatures in their upward swing sooner rather than later. So look for the cold here to be in February. January, I think, is too close to call, but I still think it's going to be well above normal following through on December. But then all of a sudden, once we get through March, and we actually see temperatures start to moderate, then we are in a fairly narrow corridor no matter what model iteration that we're looking at. And we're sitting around here slightly below normal on average for August, July, June, and May. April is going to be near normal. I think we'll see some spikes in temperature in April down. I think this could be a year where we're talking about a late frost again, late April into early May. Let's see, that was 2 years ago, was 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, we saw an early May frost over a large part of the state, especially I-70 North. This could be another one of those years, but once we get into this area right here, honestly, temperatures don't look too bad. They look pretty good to me in terms of how we can get these crops on the road to record or very, very strong yields overall. So to me, the temperature story is twofold. Warm March April with a spike or two down, even into early May, and then slightly below normal temperatures through the heart of the growing season. So what does it all mean? This is where the brass tacks come out. This is where we're actually going to start to work through the actual forecast meaning for you, because right now it's just lines on a graph when we get right down to it. So as we take a look at now what, the next slide, here's what we're looking at in terms of starting to zero in on what's coming. He's got it. All right, so the takeaways from this forecast. I look for us to have near to below normal precipitation for a large part of 2022. That's what our graphs were kind of gravitating toward. Now, not much below normal, so near to below normal, but below normal, enough to still make trend line. But remember those wild spikes that we were seeing on those graphs? The other thing that tells me is we're going to see a continuation of what started last year, actually in 2020. We saw a lot of this year in 2021. And a lot of folks are going to say, well, this is a duh statement, Ryan, but it's true. And most meteorologists aren't talking about this. We're moving into a period now that I think we're going to see highly localized problems, in particular, the excessive rain. Anytime we see that much variability when we're trying to find a pattern, but we see high variability just tweaking one or two little variables in a forecast, all of a sudden that says, hey, there's going to be clusters of areas that see more rain than anybody else. And right now, I feel that the biggest threat of that is going to be over the northern half of the states, northern Illinois, then up into Wisconsin, and I think Michigan is probably going to have some troubles on into 2022. That's where I think it is. If you're a southern half of the state farmer, you're probably looking at slightly better chances of staying on the drier side or away from some of those excessive localized rain problems. But they will be there. Can I tell you where they're going to be specifically? I cannot. Just know that the precipitation track pattern that starts in April will be followed through on through June and July. You get too much rain to start, you're going to continue to be in a very wet vein on through, I think, June and July. And the last thing we have on precipitation, I have concerns about a troublesome spring planting season. You know how harvest played out? Yeah, I think spring planting is going to play out that way too. I think we're going to have an opportunity and we got to go. And I think it could be weeks before we get another opportunity and we can go. And how soon you can go back into it depends on what happens in that couple-week period with regard to rain. If we have another rain event like what we saw in October, or even 2/3 of what we saw in October, planting will be drug out on into late May. Is that a reason right now to change thought processes at all with what you're planning for 2022? Heck no. But I do think that we're seeing this planting season get drawn out a long ways, and we may actually see it work into the advantage of soybeans even more over corn. We will see. Temperatures are going to be warmer than normal for most of the winter season. I'm giving you February as the month that I think is going to be colder, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I also think a chilly May is possible. I think that we could be picking up a late April, early May, late frost, and I think that will set the tone for May. So what I'm telling you, on one hand, this is the old meteorologist doublespeak. On one hand, I'm saying be ready to go when you have a window to go. And then the other side, I'm going to come step over here and I'm going to say, don't go too soon because it might be cold. But that's the kind of year that we are looking at. We may be itching to go and we may have a window to go in April because of dryness. But keep in mind, there is a concern about a chilly May. So that's definitely going to be pointing you toward maybe some seed treatments or how we handle that seed when we're looking to try and plant in April. Now, the heart of the growing season is near normal to slightly below normal on temperature. So that means this year, I think we have a pattern of minimal heat stress. And that is a pattern that actually has been in place now for a good number of years. Yes, we get nervous, and somebody always talks about the fact that it's hot in July or August, and oh, the corn's moving backwards. But heat alone has not really been an issue for us for a good 5, 6, 7 years. It's the lack of moisture when it gets a little bit hot. But the heat itself, I don't think heat stress is going to be a story in 2022, continuing the pattern. So if we get that crop in the ground at a decent point in time and we get through May okay, we should have good growing degree days, maybe not building up too fast, but we should be able to get good heat units on these corn and bean crops and actually get them to move along quite nicely. Go ahead and go to the next one. So, and I'll talk about this as a final note, and then I wanted to kind of rip through so we have plenty of time for questions and anything's on the table question-wise. But the big thing I want to talk to you about on this side of the weather forecast is marketing. This is going to be a year going forward, and we've seen it already. Right now with the soybean market, what are you hearing about the soybean market all the time? Yes, we're yo-yoing up and down quite a bit, but what's been in the market for the past week to 7 days? It's been South American weather. Too warm, too dry in southern Brazil and Argentina. But at the same time, we've got 88% good to excellent crops down there, and we've got CONAB and all the others raising their crop production forecasts for Brazil and Argentina. It's going to be a headline. Weather is going to be used as a reason and a way to garner big headlines, mostly by other meteorologists. There's going to be a lot of tweets out there trying to create weather problems in this year ahead. Make sure you view those with the right lenses. You're going to hear plenty talk about cold blasts, heat, La Nina, El Nino. This year it's La Nina. Does La Nina matter for us? This is the interactive part of the show. How many think La Nina matters for us? Raise your hand. All right, 1, 2.5. 1.5, 2.5. All right, 2.5 saying it does. Does it matter? Does it not matter? How many think it doesn't matter? There's one there. There's two there. Okay, so we're split. Here's the thing. La Nina doesn't matter a lick to Indiana weather. It does not have the slightest bit of reason to put a forecast together based on it in Indiana at all. But we're going to hear about it. And it's going to try and move the markets. So make sure that you know that that's what the talk is going to be. Now more than ever, forecasts that rely on 1 or 2 or 3 of those things that we mentioned are crutches. They're going to be able to get guys into the major news. You should make sure that you're aware of those, but don't seek those out. All right, just continue to look at your near-term forecast. The biggest forecast that matters for you right now is your 14 to 28-day forecast, because we have a pretty good idea of how things are going to be playing out here in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. Anything farther than that at this point is conjecture. Today you heard my conjecture. Tomorrow you'll hear somebody else's. Who's right? I am. But, you know, that be that as it may, the idea here is the weather ideas that are going to be thrown out are going to be thrown out mostly to try and move markets. We're seeing that now in South America. I think we'll see more of that once we get closer to crop planting season here. So I've taken a good amount of time so far. Now we'll go with questions. Anybody have questions on anything? Go ahead. Oh, heck yeah. If you said, hey, Ryan, I want you to give me a forecast for the next 2 days, the next 7 days, the next 2 weeks, the next 4 weeks, the next 60 days. But you can't use your own knowledge. You actually have to use a model and stick with it. And you are going to force me to do that. I'd take the European model every single time. It has a better physics package behind it. United States models do not handle physics and initialization of their model runs at all. I am a believer in climate change. The climate's always changing. Now, I don't believe in the politicalization of climate change, but the simple fact of the matter is we are seeing shifts in climate. One of the biggest what's that? Well, I'm going to point you right here in terms of not most, but we can walk away with something fairly tangible right here. When was the first frost this year? November 2nd. When was the first frost last year? October 29th, 30th. The year before that, I think it was the 26th. The year before that, it was late October again. It's been 7 years since we've had brutally cold air in here in October, such that I believe that we are actually now shifting our growing season about 2 to 3 weeks later in the year, such that places that we don't normally or didn't used to normally double crop anything in the northern part of the state, we're seeing guys try double crop and being successful. Okay, so that's where I think we're seeing a little bit of change is here. By the same token, how many times can we plant in early to mid-April and end up getting hosed? About 4 or 5 weeks. We're very volatile still in April, but we have extended the growing season, in my opinion, at least 2 weeks or longer on the back end in October. Now, where else are we seeing it in the world? I don't know. That's opinion. I'm not going to dive into that. Ah, nah. Well, you don't get any information out of China that's worth a darn. So, at this point, I really think that where we're basically seeing is a shift. I think we're seeing the weather pattern shift a little bit in the United Kingdom, so that they're more active and actually even colder because of the way the jet streams are moving. And I think we're just moving our cycles of undulation in the jet stream around. And 30 years from now, they're going to go back the other way, or they're just always moving. You bet. Who else? That's it. The only question I had was climate change in the European. All right. Anybody want to know about South America? Yeah, the Amazon. um, Weather in South America really looks to me like it's going to be near normal for a large part of the days to come and the weeks to come. So we do have a little bubble of heat that's trying to move into southern Brazil, northern Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. But it's almost like right now when we get hot and we're at 85 to 90 degrees here in July and August. Is anybody surprised? Does it really, 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 truly hurt corn? If we don't get the water, yeah, but otherwise, it's summer, guys. It's summer in South America. It will be warm. Right now, we're not seeing any kind of major, well above normal surges that last long term that are going to cause detrimental damage to crops. Some of the pictures that you're seeing are highly localized in areas that are on lighter ground in South America. Also, remember, anytime that you hear that South America is well below normal on precipitation, remember, what is below normal here? You mentioned in May, 5 inches of precipitation is normal. You know what normal precipitation this time of year is right now in southern Brazil? It's about 15. So you know what? We can grow corn on 5 inches of rain in a month, and they can grow corn on 5 inches of rain in a month. So they definitely don't have the weather issues to the same extent that we do, unless it lasts long term and backs up when they're able to plant. So I really think that most of the market chatter right now about weather problems in South America is way overdone. Now, if it's going on at the same rate and we actually see the verification of 2.5 weeks with no moisture, then in January, maybe we have a weather problem that we need to talk about. But for right now, that talk is overdone. All right, well, I'm going to hang out here for a while and answer questions if you're too chicken to come out and ask them in front of everybody. And otherwise, that's the forecast for now. Come back next week when it could change. Go ahead. Yep. Yep. We could be getting to the top of the cycle. Some of the things that have changed though are come down to, where I don't believe in the politicalization of climate change. I do think that we've cleared more land and we have more land that's actually acting as a heat sink right now. So I guess what I think that I would interpret that as being is we may not go back. We may not ever go back to that part of the cycle. I think we are reaching a peak here, but I don't think the valley will be near as low. And the next peak, I don't know. In theory, those peaks could come down and then go back a little bit. But I don't think that we're going to be able to reach those same peaks that we had 30, 40, 50 years ago, especially with some of the areas here that we had a lot more vegetation. We have a lot of heat sink now. All right. Anyone else? Go ahead. Well, La Nina is a cooling of the waters in the Pacific. And so cool air usually stays put a little bit better than the warm. So El Nino is warming. And so those parcels move faster. So we see La Nina effects in the United States, but we don't see them here in the eastern Corn Belt. Where we see the La Nina effects a lot are southern plains, Texas on up into Oklahoma, Kansas. We see some effects California Gulf Coast, not as much as El Nino, the California coast. And then we actually see La Nina lead itself into potentially a more active hurricane season in the Gulf. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not sure I believe the extent of what that one model was showing for the month of August, but we could see a little more action in the tropics next year if La Nina holds. Where we see the actual biggest effects of La Nina are down in Argentina and Brazil. And so that's why I definitely don't think it's mattering. If La Nina is not really impacting Brazilian crops yet up to this point, it's probably not. And I don't think the strength is there to really cause even any problems in the southern plains for the wheat belt. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, I'll hang out here for a while. Thank you for coming and watching the gig here, and we'll talk soon.